Are you serious? Formation was at 0600, Sergeant, not 0615. What is this, your first rodeo? The voice of Gunnery Sergeant Croft, thick with condescending authority, cut through the crisp desert air. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the platoon, a chorus of compliance from young Marines who knew better than to be on the gunny's bad side. He stood with his hands on his hips, a bulldog of a man whose perfectly starched uniform seemed to be a physical manifestation of his rigid worldview. The woman standing before him, Sergeant Eva Rostova, was his polar opposite. Her camis were faded and soft from use, not neglect, and a stray strand of brown hair had escaped her tightly wound bun. She didn't look flustered or apologetic. She just stood there, her hands held loosely at her sides, her gaze calm and fixed somewhere over his shoulder. Her silence was a vacuum, pulling all the air and noise out of his tirade. "I asked you a question, Sergeant," Croft barked, stepping closer. "Or, is listening also optional in whatever unit you crawled out of?" Still, she said nothing. She simply gave a slow, deliberate blink. High above them, on the observation deck of the advanced sniper range, Colonel Vance lowered his binoculars. He didn't see a tardy NCO. He saw a stance, a rooted, placid stillness that was anything but undisciplined. It was the calm of a predator, not the carelessness of a subordinate. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type quiet professional in the comments below. The humiliation continued, a verbal barrage designed to dismantle and display. Gunny Croft was a master of this particular art form, using public correction as a tool of power. He paced in front of Rostova, his voice a gravelly lecture for the benefit of the entire company. He spoke of discipline, of standards, of the sacred trust between Marines, and how her simple act of being late was a betrayal of it all. He pointed to her rifle case, a worn, non-regulation Pelican case covered in faded stickers from places he didn't recognize, and sneered. "Probably got some souped-up civilian garbage in there instead of a proper M40A6. This is the Marine Corps, Sergeant, not a weekend shooting club." Through it all, Rostova remained a statue of placid composure. Her breathing was even, her posture relaxed but ready. She wasn't ignoring him. She was processing, prioritizing. His words were just noise, like the wind whistling past the baffles on the firing line. Her mission was on the targets downrange, not the temporary obstacle standing in front of her. The other Marines watched, a mix of pity and morbid curiosity on their faces. They saw a quiet sergeant being eaten alive by a loud gunny. They saw an easy target. What none of them saw, what they were not trained to recognize, was the profound and dangerous patience in her eyes. It was the patience of someone who knew the truth would arrive on its own schedule, and it would need no introduction. The tirade finally exhausted itself, and Croft, with a final dismissive wave, assigned Rostova to the end of the firing line. "Lane 12. Let's see what you've got. Try to keep up." The exercise began. It was a qualification under brutal conditions, a cold bore shot at 900 meters, followed by a rapid engagement of moving targets at variable distances, all with a swirling, unpredictable crosswind that was already pushing other shooters' rounds off paper. The air filled with the sharp crack of rifles and the frustrated curses of Marines fighting the elements. Croft stomped behind the line, shouting corrections on windage and elevation. Then, it was Rostova's turn. She moved with an unnerving economy of motion. Her hands, steady and sure, unlatched the old Pelican case. Inside rested not a new A6, but a heavily customized M210 enhanced sniper rifle, its stock worn smooth in the places her hand and cheek knew intimately. She didn't rush. She laid out her mat, mounted the rifle on its bipod, and pulled a small, battered notebook from her pocket. A dope book whose pages were filled with a decade of precise, handwritten data. She ran a thumb over the page for today's atmospheric conditions, her lips barely moving as she calculated the solution in her head. She was a craftsman preparing her tools, a surgeon before the first cut, entirely absorbed in the silent language of her profession. There was no ceremony to her first shot, no dramatic pause, just the culmination of 1,000 silent rehearsals. Her breath eased out, Her finger curled around the trigger, and the rifle delivered a single, muffled cough. The sound was swallowed by the vastness of the desert. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a faint ping echoed back from the distant steel target, a sound so clear and pure it cut through all the other noise. The spotter for her lane, a young lance corporal, stared through his scope, his mouth agape. "Hit," he whispered, his voice full of disbelief. Dead center. Before he could say more, Rostova was already working the bolt, her movements fluid and seamless. The next target, a mover, appeared. Crack ping. Hit. The next, further out, exposed for only a few seconds. Crack ping. Hit. One by one, she cleared the entire course of fire. She didn't just hit the targets, she executed them. Each shot was a statement of irrefutable fact. The cadence of her firing was a rhythm of pure competence. The wind that bedeviled everyone else seemed to part for her rounds. Up and down the line, the other rifles fell silent. The Marine stopped shooting to watch the impossible display. Gunny Croft stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. The silence that followed her final shot was deafening. It was the sound of every arrogant assumption being shattered at over 3,000 feet per second. Into that stunned silence strode Colonel Vance. He descended from the observation tower with a purpose that commanded attention. He walked past the slack-jawed Gunny Croft without a glance and came to a stop not in front of Rostova, but beside the large, sun-bleached honor wall near the range office. This wasn't just a list of top scores. It was the history of the unit's lethality, with names etched into brass plates dating back to Vietnam. The colonel ignored the freshly painted names of recent hotshots. His eyes, sharp and knowing, scanned the permanent legends, the names that were spoken of in reverent tones in the NCO clubs and training halls. He was searching for a ghost, for the confirmation of suspicion sparked by a simple, steady stance. The Marines watched, confused. Rostova had begun methodically cleaning her rifle, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The colonel ran a finger down a list of hallowed names until he stopped. A low, appreciative grunt escaped his lips. He had found what he was looking for. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the platoon, over Gunny Croft, and finally settling on the quiet sergeant at the end of the line. His expression was one of profound, unambiguous respect. Gunny Croft. The colonel's voice was calm, but carried the weight of a command that could not be questioned. Step forward, Croft moved as if in a trance, his earlier bluster completely evaporated. The colonel pointed to the brass plate on the wall. "Read that name." Out loud, Gunny Croft squinted, his eyes struggling to focus on the small, engraved letters. The narrator's voice echoes the inscription, layering truth over the scene. Unit, 1st Marine Raider Battalion. Designation, Lead Scout Sniper. Deployments, classified. Honors, Bronze Star with Combat V Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Croft's own voice was a dry rasp as he read the name aloud. Sergeant, Rostova. He looked from the plaque to the woman and back again, the connection finally slamming into his consciousness like a physical blow. The quiet, undisciplined sergeant was not just a shooter. She was a Tier 1 asset, a legend from the secretive world of Marine Special Operations Command, likely here on a temporary training assignment or as a gray man observer. The colonel let the revelation hang in the air for a full 10 seconds before he acted. He faced Rostova, who had now stood up, and his posture shifted. He drew himself to his full height, his back ramrod straight, and executed a sharp, perfect salute. It was a gesture of immense respect from a full-bird colonel to a sergeant. "Sergeant Rostova," Vance said, his voice ringing with authority. "My apologies for the welcome. We were not tracking your credentials." The story of what happened on Range 12 that morning spread faster than a brush fire. It was whispered in the Chow Hall line, recounted with growing embellishment in the barracks, and typed into hushed message threads between NCOs across the base. The quiet sergeant who showed up late, the gunny who tore her apart, the impossible shooting, the colonel's salute, the name on the wall. It became instant folklore, a cautionary tale for the arrogant, and an inspiration for the humble. They called her the ghost of the range, a quiet professional who had materialized just long in her own legend. Gunny Croft became a central figure in the story, but not as a villain. He was the lesson. Later that day, he found Sergeant Rostova near the motor pool, methodically performing maintenance on a vehicle. He approached not with a swagger, but with the posture of a man who had been fundamentally humbled. He stood before her, cleared his throat, and delivered a formal, sincere apology, ending with, "I was wrong, Sergeant. I made an assumption based on appearances. It will not happen again." His words were not an excuse, but a confession. He had confused spit and polish with combat effectiveness, and had been given a master class in the difference. Rostova listened to his apology, her expression unchanging. When he was finished, she simply nodded once. "We're on the same team, Gunny," she said, her voice low and even. Then she turned back to her work, the matter closed. For her, it was never personal. It was about the mission, the standard. There was no room for ego, hers or anyone else's. She didn't need his apology, but she accepted it because it meant the lesson was learned and the team would be stronger for it. In the days that followed, the change in Croft was palpable. He was quieter, more observant. He started asking his Marines not how sharp their uniform creases were, but how well they knew their equipment. The symbolic artifact of the day wasn't a trophy or a plaque. It was something far more subtle. A few days later, a young Marine, the same one who had been her spotter, nervously approached Rostova. He was struggling with his wind calls. Without a word, she walked with him to the range, sat with him for 2 hours, and patiently broke down the intricate art of reading the wind, passing on a piece of her silent, deadly craft. Her legacy wasn't about being right. It was about making others better. Months later, Sergeant Rostova was gone, reassigned back to the shadowy world from which she came as quietly as she had arrived. But her presence lingered. The story of her morning on the range had become a permanent part of the base's culture, a teaching point for every new batch of NCOs. It was Gunny Croft who now told the story most effectively. Standing before a group of newly promoted sergeants, brimming with fresh authority, he would point toward the honor wall. "Before you open your mouth to correct a Marine," he'd say, his voice lacking its old bite, replaced with a hard-won wisdom, "you better be sure you know who you are talking to. Out here, respect is a currency you earn with competence, not with the volume of your voice. Look at that wall. There are ghosts on it, and you never know when one of them is standing right in front of you." He had learned the most critical lesson of leadership. That true authority is derived not from the rank on your collar, but from the respect you show to the quiet professionals who get the job done, no matter what they look like. The real measure of a warrior is not found in the perfect timing of their arrival at formation, but in the perfect timing of their impact on target. It is a legacy written not in reports and commendations, but in the deafening silence that follows an act of impossible skill. Sergeant Rostova left behind more than just a story. She left behind a new standard. A standard where quiet competence would forever be valued over loud assumption, where the steady hand of a master was revered more than the angry voice of a gatekeeper. Her legacy wasn't the brass plate with her name on it. It was the moment of humbled silence in a loud-mouthed Gunny. It was the newfound confidence in a young spotter. It was the understanding that the most dangerous people on any battlefield are the ones you don't notice until it's too late. True legacy is the quiet, unwavering standard of excellence that inspires others to be better, to be calmer, to be more professional. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Hero Stories.